The day my cousin handed me a spreadsheet of my financial failures, I was sitting at her kitchen table eating a bowl of cereal I'd bought myself in an apartment I'd been paying half the rent on for 2 years. She slid it across the marble countertop like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. "I made this for you," she said, "because I love you and I think you need to see the reality of your situation." I looked down at the paper. She had actually typed it out. Column A, my estimated salary. Column B, what she assumed I spent on unnecessary things. Column C, which she had helpfully highlighted in red, the gap between what I earned and what she calculated I should have saved by now. I was 31 years old. I had a master's degree in financial analytics. I managed risk portfolios for a living. I looked at her spreadsheet and I looked at her face and I said absolutely nothing. That was the beginning of the end. Or maybe it was the end of the beginning. I still haven't decided which. My cousin and I grew up 2 streets apart in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. Same family cookouts, same Christmas morning chaos at my grandmother's house. Same aunts who pinched our cheeks until we were old enough to dodge them. She was 4 years older than me, which meant for most of my childhood she was the one who knew things I didn't, who got to do things I couldn't yet, who existed in a version of the world I was always just arriving at. She was the kind of person who made everything look easy. Straight hair, straight posture, a laugh that never cracked into something ugly. She married her college boyfriend at 26, bought a condo in the short north neighborhood of Columbus at 28, and by 32, she was working in marketing for a healthcare company and hosting dinner parties where the appetizers came on little slate boards. I was proud of her. Genuinely. I told people about her like she was something I'd accomplished. After my divorce, which I do not want to spend much time on here, but which happened quickly and quietly when I was 28, the way fires sometimes do, I needed somewhere to land. My apartment lease was up. My ex had the dog. I had 4 boxes of books, a mattress, and a very specific kind of humiliation that comes from having to explain to your family why the future you all celebrated is no longer happening. My cousin offered me her second bedroom. "Stay as long as you need," she said on the phone. "Seriously, we have the space. It's just sitting there." I cried in my car after I hung up. The good kind of crying, the kind where you feel like maybe the world is not entirely made of teeth. I moved in on a Saturday in March, and for the first few months it was fine. Better than fine, actually. We cooked dinner together sometimes. We watched bad reality television and made fun of it with the precise cruelty that only family can manage. Her husband traveled for work 2 weeks out of every month, and on those nights, we would sit on the couch and talk the way we used to as kids. The real kind of talking. The kind where you say things you don't say out loud anywhere else. I paid her $1,200 a month for the room. That was what we agreed on, what we shook hands on, what I transferred to her every first of the month without a single missed payment. I also paid half the utilities. I bought my own groceries. I cleaned the bathroom we shared without being asked. I thought we were friends. I thought we had made a home, temporarily, the way families sometimes do. I did not see what was building underneath. The spreadsheet moment was in October, 8 months after I'd moved in. But before I can tell you what happened when I looked at that piece of paper, I have to tell you about the job. 3 months after my divorce, while I was still sleeping on an air mattress at my mother's house and pretending everything was fine, I got a call from a recruiter. A financial consulting firm in Columbus was expanding their risk analytics division. They had seen my LinkedIn, they liked my thesis work, they wanted to talk. I did not tell anyone. Not my mother, not my cousin, not any of the friends who had sent me flowers after the divorce like I was recovering from surgery. I did not want to be someone who celebrated things before they happened. I had done that once already, and I knew what it felt like when the party was over. I interviewed 3 times over 6 weeks. I wore the same blazer to each interview because it was the one that made me feel like a person who knew what she was doing. On the 3rd interview, they offered me the position, Senior Risk Analyst. Base salary of $112,000 plus quarterly bonuses. Benefits package that made me have to sit very still for a moment in the parking garage on the way to my car so that I could process the number without making a sound. I took the job. I started 2 weeks later. I worked quietly, I worked hard, and I did not talk about it. At my cousin's apartment, I was just her cousin who had gone through a divorce and needed a soft place to fall. That was what she saw. That was the full story, as far as she knew. I should have corrected that, I know that now. But I was tired of performing my life for other people's comfort. I was tired of announcing things so that the people around me could decide how to feel about them. I wanted, for once, to just do something and let it be done. So I said nothing. I went to work. I deposited my checks. I rebuilt, quietly, the way you rebuild when you have learned that rebuilding out loud only gives people something to watch fail. By the time October came around, I had been at the job for 5 months. I had also, without telling anyone in my family, made an offer on a unit. Not a house. Not some sprawling suburban thing with a yard I would have to mow. A condo. A 2-bedroom unit in a building 4 miles from where my cousin lived, in a neighborhood I had been walking through on weekends for months, learning its rhythms, figuring out whether I could imagine waking up there. The answer was yes. The offer was accepted in September. Closing was scheduled for mid-November. This is the context you need for what happened with the spreadsheet. She slid it across the table, and I looked at it, and I did not say what I knew. I looked at her column C, highlighted in red, and I said, "Where did you get these numbers?" "I estimated," she said. She was pouring herself coffee, leaning against the counter with the easy authority of someone who had never doubted their right to an opinion. "I'm not trying to be mean. I just think you've been here long enough that we should talk about what the plan actually is." "The plan." "You're 31, Nora." She set down her mug. "I know the divorce was hard. I know you needed time, but you can't just float. You need a 5-year plan. You need to be aggressive about savings. Are you even contributing to your 401k? I was contributing 6% and my company matched 4%, which meant I was effectively setting aside 10% of a salary she did not know I made. "I'm fine," I said. "You're paying me $1,200 a month," she said, "which I appreciate. But that's money going nowhere. You're not building equity. You don't have a retirement plan. You don't have a cushion. And I know you don't make that much right now because the kind of entry-level analytics work you were doing before the divorce, I'm not doing entry-level work." She paused. "What?" "I'm not doing entry-level work," I said again. I kept my voice level. I was very good at keeping my voice level. It was one of the things I was best at. I switched jobs. She blinked. "When?" "A few months ago." "And you didn't say anything?" "I didn't say anything," I confirmed. There was a silence. I watched her rearrange her face, watched her process the fact that the story she had been telling about me was missing chapters. "Well," she said finally, "that's great. What are you doing now?" "Risk analytics." "Senior level." Another pause. Longer this time. "Senior level." "Yes." She looked at me with an expression I recognized, though I had never had it directed at me from her before. I had seen it on the faces of people at work when a meeting goes in a direction they did not anticipate and they need a moment to figure out whose fault it is. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. I thought about that. I thought about all the ways to answer it honestly. I thought about the spreadsheet she had made me, the red highlighted column, the implicit verdict in every row. "I'm going to make breakfast," I said. "Do you want eggs?" I want to be honest about something. I was not entirely innocent in what happened next. I could have told her about the job. I could have told her about the condo. I could have told her about the condo. I could have given her the information that would have changed the shape of everything. I did not. And the reason I did not was not purely privacy, not purely the desire to rebuild in silence. Some of it, maybe more than I want to admit, was that I was curious. I wanted to see what happened when someone who had decided who you were came face to face with evidence that they were wrong. I was not proud of that curiosity, but it was there, and I am telling this the way it actually happened. Things shifted after the spreadsheet morning. Not dramatically at first, but in the small, cumulative way that things shift when someone realizes they have less information than they thought. She started asking questions. How was the new job going? What was the culture like? Did I like my manager? They were the questions you ask someone when you are recalibrating, when you are trying to update the map you have been using to navigate them. And then, In November, her husband came home from a work trip and mentioned at dinner that his firm had been discussing the Columbus real estate market. Inventory was low, he said. Good units were selling fast. He looked at me across the table with genuine friendliness. The way he always had. He was a good man, her husband, kinder than she knew how to be sometimes, and said, "You thinking about buying anything, Nora? It's a good time if you have the down payment." Actually, I said, I'm closing on a place next week. The table went very quiet. My cousin set down her fork. You're closing on a place, she said, a 2-bedroom condo. Over on Summit Street. Summit Street. She repeated it like she was trying to make sure she had heard correctly. That's about 4 miles from here. She looked at her husband. He looked at me. The look on his face was something between surprise and delight. The private pleasure of someone watching a story become interesting. How long have you been planning this? She said. A while. How long is a while? I made the offer in September. Her expression did something complicated. The math was being done behind her eyes. October. The spreadsheet, the red highlighted column, the speech about floating and 5-year plans. She was understanding that she had handed me a document about my financial failures at a time when I was 30 days out from closing on a condo. You knew, she said, when I showed you that. Yes. And you didn't say anything? No. She picked up her fork and put it down again without eating anything. Why? I thought about the careful answer. I thought about the diplomatic answer, the gracious answer, the answer that would preserve the dinner table atmosphere and get us all through to dessert without incident. Because, I said, I wanted you to finish. The closing happened on a Thursday in mid-November. I signed more paper than I had ever signed in my life, and then I held a key. An actual key, small and unremarkable, the kind that comes on a little paper tag, and I stood in an empty condo on the 3rd floor of a building on Summit Street, and I allowed myself, privately and completely, to feel what I had been not feeling for almost 3 years. I did not cry. I just stood there for a long time. The windows faced east. The afternoon light came in sideways across the empty floor. I had done this, not with anyone watching, not with anyone cheering, not with the framework of anyone else's belief in me holding the whole thing up. I texted my mother. I called my best friend from graduate school. I ordered a pizza and ate it sitting on the floor because I didn't have a single piece of furniture yet. I did not call my cousin. I moved out of her apartment on a Saturday 3 weeks after closing. I had been packed for most of that time, my things consolidated back into the boxes they had come in, my section of the bathroom cleared, my key on the counter. She helped me carry boxes to my car. We did 4 trips together, mostly in silence, the kind of silence that has too much in it to be called comfortable but too much history in it to be called hostile. On the last trip, when we were standing next to my loaded car in the parking garage, she said, "I'm glad you're doing well." I looked at her. I tried to find the version of my cousin that had sat with me on that couch and talked like we were kids again, and I found it. She was still in there, under everything else, under the spreadsheet and the red column and the October morning. "I know you are," I said. She nodded. She put her hands in her pockets. "I think," she said slowly, "I had a version of you in my head that wasn't really you anymore. I thought about the work it takes to update the map, the ego cost of it, the specific kind of courage required to admit that the person you thought you were helping does not, in fact, need what you were offering. People change," I said. "It's hard to track. You could have told me. You could have asked." Another silence. Then she laughed, a short, real laugh, not the polished one, the other kind. And I laughed too. And for a moment we were just 2 women in a parking garage. Family, which is a thing that does not dissolve even when you want it to. "Call me when you get furniture," she said. "I will," I said. I don't know if either of us meant it entirely, but it was the right thing to say, and we both knew it, and that was enough for the moment. The thing no one tells you about rebuilding quietly is that you do it alone, which sounds obvious but isn't. The aloneness is not just logistical. It is emotional. It is the experience of going through something significant, a loss, a failure, a slow and difficult reconstruction of self, without the warmth of other people's attention on it. There were days I would have given anything for someone to notice what I was doing, to see the way I was putting things back together, piece by piece, without making a sound about it. But I learned something in those years that I do not think I could have learned any other way. I learned that the most solid things are built without an audience. I learned that the narrative other people construct about you, the story they tell about who you are and what you're capable of and what you deserve, has very little to do with the truth of you. It is just a story. It is just their story. You are allowed to be living a completely different one. The condo on Summit Street had east-facing windows and a kitchen with white subway tile and a second bedroom that I turned into an office. And on weekend mornings I would make coffee and sit at my desk and watch the light move across the floor, and I would think, this is mine. Not dramatic. Not triumphant, not the way the movies make triumph look. Just mine. I had stood in my cousin's kitchen while she explained to me with color-coded columns exactly how small my life was. I did not correct her. I just went home and signed the papers. My grandmother called me in December, the month after the move. She was 78 years old and still lived in the house where she had raised 4 children, and she had the particular authority of a woman who has outlasted most of the things that were supposed to define her. "Your cousin tells me you bought a place," she said. "I did." "Good." A pause. "She also tells me she feels bad. She doesn't need to." "I know she doesn't need to. But she does. That's who she is." "That's who she is." Another pause, the comfortable kind, the kind my grandmother did when she was choosing words. "You know, when your mother was young, her sister used to tell her what she should be doing with her life too. Used to make charts?" I stopped. "Grandma, I'm just saying, it runs in the family. The charting." I laughed. I hadn't expected to laugh, but I did. "You're going to be fine," she said. It was not a question. It was not even encouragement, really. It was more like an observation, the way you might note that the weather is going to clear. "I know," I said. "Then act like it," she said. "And invite me over when you get a couch." I got the couch in January. A gray sectional, on sale, that took 4 hours and a very patient delivery crew to maneuver through the hallway. I made my grandmother a cup of tea and she sat on it and looked around the condo with the slow, comprehensive assessment of someone who has furnished many rooms and knows what a home looks like when it's becoming itself. "Nice light," she said. "East-facing." She nodded. "Your grandfather always said east-facing windows meant optimism?" I thought he was being ridiculous. Now I think maybe he had a point. I sat next to her on the sectional. We drank our tea. My cousin texted me that afternoon. "Hope your grandmother's visit went well. I'm around if you ever want to grab coffee." I looked at the text for a long time. I thought about the spreadsheet, the red column, the October morning, and the way she had poured her coffee with the certainty of someone who already knew all the answers. I thought about the couch and the east-facing windows and my grandmother saying, "Act like it." I wrote back, "It went great. Coffee sounds good. Next week?" She replied with a thumbs-up emoji, and then, a minute later, a heart. "We have not entirely figured out what we are to each other now. Maybe we won't for a while. But she is my family, which means she is part of the story whether the chapter goes well or not, and I have learned, am still learning, that the story does not have to be perfect to be mine." I closed my phone. I sat in the light. Outside the east-facing windows, Columbus was doing what Columbus does in January. Gray, cold, quietly persistent. The kind of city that does not make a lot of noise about continuing to exist. It just does. I understood that now in a way I hadn't before. I was not floating. I had never been floating. I was building, and now, for the first time in a long time, I was doing it in a place that belonged entirely to me. The thing about being underestimated is that it only works if you let it land. My cousin made a spreadsheet. She color-coded it. She sat across from me in her own kitchen, in a home I was paying $1,200 a month to exist inside, and she explained, column by column, why my life was not adding up. And the honest truth is, she was not doing it to be cruel. She genuinely believed what she was showing me. She had looked at the version of me that had shown up at her door, divorced, quiet, apparently starting over, and she had decided that was the whole picture. She built her case on incomplete information and called it love. That is the part I keep coming back to. Not the spreadsheet itself, but the confidence of it, the certainty that she had enough data to draw a conclusion. I used to think the solution was to correct people faster, to announce things before they had time to form the wrong impression. But I tried that version of my life and it made me exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the work. Performing your progress for other people is its own full-time job, and it pays nothing. What I learned. Slowly, the way you learn things that actually stick is that your choices do not become more real because someone else witnesses them. The offer I made on that condo was binding whether or not my cousin knew about it. The salary I deposited every 2 weeks did not increase because I announced it at dinner. The things I was building were being built regardless of who had updated their mental file on me. That is not a small thing. It took me a long time to understand it fully. There is a version of integrity that is about honesty with other people. And then there is a quieter version, the one that is harder to maintain, which is honesty with yourself about what you are actually doing versus what you are performing. I had spent years performing competence, performing recovery, performing fine. When I finally stopped performing and just started doing, the results were different, not louder, just more solid. My grandmother sat on my sectional in January and said the light was good. That was all she said about the condo, really. She did not say I had proven anything. She did not say I had shown anyone. She just noted the light and drank her tea. And something about that felt more like recognition than anything else I had received through the whole process. Because that is what resilience actually looks like, I think. Not the dramatic moment. Not the spreadsheet reveal, not the closing documents on the table. It is the January morning after. The gray Columbus sky, the east-facing windows, the coffee getting cold while you sit in a room that belongs to you because you decided, quietly and without ceremony, that it would. My cousin and I are still family. We are still figuring out what that means after everything. I do not think she's a bad person. I think she had a story about me that was out of date and I waited too long to correct it, and somewhere in that gap, things got complicated. But the condo is mine. The closing documents have my name on them. And every morning I sit in that east-facing light, I think about what it costs to wait for someone else's permission to believe you are doing all right. It costs everything, and it is a price worth refusing to pay.